watching Business Unusual here on Newsroom Africa, channel 405. Starting a new job, a new role, or even embarking on a new stage in your life is said to be among the most stressful events one can endure. Now, I can imagine that there is nothing more stressful than feeling like you're in way over your head, especially when getting into these type of transitional stages, much like what Thandi was describing earlier on today, having signed her contract after a long job search. It probably wasn't easy in the first place, but the big question is, how do you work around some of these psychosocial issues? And I'm joined in the studio by Palesa Radebe. She's a founder and the CEO at NeoPsych Psychological Services. And we also continue our conversation with Ayabonga Cawe from Harambee Youth Employment Accelerator. How are you?
I'm okay, and yourself?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you.
We're talking off air, I guess, about some of the anxieties and I was asking Thandi earlier on, you know, is she scared about, I guess, the weight of expectation that is now associated with her role? Because in as much as a job is about money, there's also the social function of having a job. You know, I guess many of us black people will tell you that the moment you have a job and you're bringing money into the household, it also, I guess, amplifies your voice inside that household as well. So how do we manage that, I guess, weight of expectation and also that anxiety that comes with having to perform, because it's a new job, you want to impress, you want to make a good impression just off the bat? Yeah,
I think the first way of ever, when you walk into a new space, it's about recognizing your capabilities as an individual. Because what you tend to do is, I'm in a new space, in a new environment, and what I want to do is, as you said, kind of excel and show my goods off the bat. But once you kind of overextend yourself, what then happens is you lead to a state of burnout. And that's what we try and avoid at all costs. So first things first, recognize your abilities and your sense of capacity within that job space. How many more hours am I going to need to kind of engage within that space? To what extent am I going to have to kind of adjust and change my lifestyle? And in doing that, the most important thing is recognizing what it is, or rather to what extent that might kind of lead you to moving backwards as opposed to forward. So gauge your capabilities, gauge the amount of time you have in a day, and then from there put in protocols, stages, steps for yourself to kind of go from one to the next to your full potential.
I was talking to a friend about the same thing, which is sort of how do you manage your tasks throughout the course of a day and plan around those. And we'll come back to that. Let me bring you in here. I mean, much of the work that you do at Harambee is around also, you know, psychosocial training alongside functional competence and maybe some of the other things that people need to land a job. I'm quite interested in the people that you've managed to place in a wide array of sectors, be it in hospitality, banking, and many other spaces. When you go and you monitor, say, a year in, and you have these engagements with them, how much does this particular issue come up where people are saying, I'm really anxious at work because of this massive weight of expectation for me to perform?
Yeah, I mean, I think that comes up quite a few times, and that's why we actually invest so much in just readying young people to get into the world of work. We know, for example, that sometimes it's about the little things that you need to take care of, and like if you say like your life is in a little bit of order and it's a little bit more orderly, you can manage yourself well. So we know that discipline is so important, so showing up on time is really, really key, and it can actually just set your day and off to a really, really great start. So we talk a lot about that, and I think for many young people who are currently unemployed, they obviously haven't been in the world of work and still haven't actually had the practical experience of what does it mean? What does it mean about what I do with my child now in the morning? So having to drop off a child at childcare, that all takes a lot of time. And what we see in our work readiness programs is that, you know, in that first week or two, they are running late because they forgot to do this. And if you've been like unemployed and sitting at home for the last 2-3 years, it really takes time to change your behavior and change your world to be able to fit that in. Sometimes it's just even about like waking up on time. You know, if you live in Tembisa and you've got to come and work in CBD, it means that, you know, you may need to be up at 4:30 in the morning every day. So, and that's like a whole new routine, a whole new discipline. And you know, we try and do a lot of that like in the face. So some of these things people can actually start even before they start the world of work and basically just get yourself into some of these habits and the rhythm of it.
But one day we need to talk about this apartheid spatial planning. I'll go 4:30. Just to, no, it doesn't make sense. Palesa, the other thing I'm quite interested in is, you know, some of the, I guess, tips, tools, rules of thumb that we can give people to manage your tasks better. I mean, I know certainly some of the unease or uncertainty one feels about certainly their week and the things that they need to do when that to-do list is so extensive. It includes a new job, it includes fetching the kids. There's oftentimes, I guess, I try and find time on a Sunday evening and try and map out my week, try and jot all of the stuff down. And there's also, I guess, a sense of pleasure in being able to tick those things off your to-do list and scratch them out.
Absolutely. The visual representation of things that you have done, kind of, it sends a bit of the endorphins to the brain saying, hey, I've completed a task and now I'm doing something, productive and helping me move forward. So as Mam Lebo was saying, for an individual who has just started a job, I always suggest, especially with my clients who are in the career space and are moving into new dimensions, 2 to 3 weeks before, kind of put yourself in the space of, okay, so this is my first day of work, how do I go about doing it? So you know that you've got the 3-week space to make your errors, to make your faults, to figure out the different routes that make sense for you. So if you're in a car and you're driving, okay, so the M1, for instance, is shut down. Do I have an alternative? So it's those types of things. But in addition to that is kind of collect your resources. Many of us, don't necessarily maybe have our parents in our spaces because just life happens sometimes. But consider your neighbors, consider your grandparents, whoever is the closest to you. Rally your support system. Because in that space and time, you know that, again, it's an alternative that I have for myself should things not go according to plan. But then apart from that, it's again, as you were saying, just sit back and have a conversation with yourself about, can I really accomplish all of this that I've put on my plate? It is a lot. And it's kind of like one of those situations when you think about when you take medication. It takes about 2 to 3 weeks before it kind of goes into the system and you start feeling better, all the symptoms start dying out. Getting into a new process takes the exact same type of initiation or kind of working space where you need to allow it to seep into your routine, seep into your bodily functions, your faculties, for lack of a better explanation, and then work out the kinks along the way. You're not going to be perfect from the jump, but you need to be aware of what it is you can do, how far you can stretch yourself, but then also the resources you have available to you. Write all of it down beforehand and move forward.
How can onboarding processes help you? Because I think a lot of this anxiety has to do with sometimes very limited communication or very limited communication of expectations during the onboarding process. So you find yourself in a new job, not really sure what's expected of you, not really sure at what level you ought to be performing and what's expected of you every single day, every single week, and every single month. And sometimes that might heighten some of that anxiety and unease rather than maybe lessen it.
I mean, I think some employers are really good about how they induct people in and integrate them into the organization. But if you do end up in a space where there isn't great induction, I mean, I would say, first of all, your manager is really the person you really need to be close to, just to understand exactly what the expectations are, and asking for feedback, seeking for that feedback. So don't wait to be told. I think there's a need to take some initiative and really bug your manager about like the things that you're not clear on. Making a friend at work is really, really important. Some organizations come up with these buddy systems that when I join, then I'm assigned a buddy. And I think if you don't happen to be in an organization that assigns you one, find yourself a buddy and make sure that you are with someone who's been around, who can really just coach you in terms of the culture, what happens around here. So, culture is such an important a part of why people succeed or don't succeed. So being a culture fit and really understanding, this is how things are done around here is really important. And being able to then understand the rules of the game and of the environment so that you can adapt or adapt to them.
It's interesting that you mentioned this point of taking charge of your career and your professional life, right? And seeking out feedback, going there and saying, look, I've done this and this is what needs to happen. Now, one of the most, I guess, anxiety-raising things, certainly for young professionals, I know in my case it was a massive issue like that, is one, receiving feedback, but I guess in the shoes of many employers who might also be watching this show, is how do you give feedback in an affirming and constructive way that, tries to get this young person much closer to the potential that all of us have.
It's a very tricky road to sometimes walk because it's never easy for someone to say you're doing something wrong and then you don't take it fully personally, like you're the one who's wrong. So my advice to employers, number one, would just be remove the individual as much as you can from the workspace. And what I mean by that is don't necessarily point out a characteristic flaw based on the work that they've done, but rather speak to the work itself alone. Because you don't want to necessarily knock a person's motivation and sense of being or belonging within a space, even before they've gotten anywhere. And then in terms of the employees, that one's also hard. Just more than anything, recognize that within any working space or within any new environment, there will be challenges. And it's just about recognizing the fact that where there's a need for growth, there will be a need for improvement on the personal self. But again, as I said, if you had started the work environment taking stock of who it is you are, so it's a lot of self-work. If you know who you are and why it is you walked into that space, the words of other people won't necessarily hit you quite as hard.
And respect the process, I guess.
100%, 100%. Because that is a part of the entire thing. We've got to give and take and have a conversation about, okay, so these are the areas, these are the improvements, how do we work together? So when we can kind of meet in the middle as employer and employee, nothing can kind of knock us down.
How much of this is, I guess, a misalignment of our expectations? I mean, I remember when I was at sort of university and even at school, when I'd see working people, you know, wearing the heels or wearing our kick and powers, you know, it looked very glamorous. It looked like these people every single day go there and they have the kind of day that I only see, you know, on series,
TV.
right? It looked like that kind of day. And I wish that somebody at some point had said to me, there are going to be those days that are difficult. There are going to be those days where you don't feel up to it, but you're going to have to dust yourself off and keep going.
Or those days where you've got to put in the late nights.
Exactly.
You've got to work on weekends. All these things that you didn't like anticipate. But I think really it is about about you understanding as much as possible about what you're getting yourself into before you even get there. And once you're there, really just trying to understand, look around you, see who is it who succeeds around here. So what does success look like? And can I be that? And having these very internal conversations. And I think for young women, I would say just be confident, because we know that we see a difference in the terms of confidence that young men and young women have. Just this idea of taking charge of your own career. It is a lot easier to hear something when you've asked for it, rather than when someone just says, hey, we now come, we need to come and talk about it. So I think just getting in there with this confidence and space and patience with yourself, is really, really important, because you've got to back yourself up and you've got your best backer, basically.
Thank you so much, guys. Really, really appreciate it. That there was Palesa Radebe and Ayabonga from Harambee. They're joining us to speak about that issue, and Palesa Radebe, psychologist, speaking about some of the issues associated with starting a new job, starting a new pursuit, and doing all manner of other things that are new and unfamiliar to us. And on Job Seekers Wednesday, that's the kind of conversations and the kind of content we want to bring to you here on Business Unusual on the Newsroom Africa Channel 405. Remember